Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Pancast. Now, what is a Pancast? Just for the sake of the algorithm, a Pancast is my twist on a podcast, and it's a little cooking and kitchen show where we talk about food and recipes and wine and drinks and cookware and anything related to the kitchen. Focus a lot on you guys, audience feedback and interaction there, anything topical that relates to the kitchen. And that is a Pancast. Hopefully the algorithm can process that. What we're going to do in this episode, we got all kinds of stuff going on. A couple of deals I saw, one at Sam's, one at Costco. A little feedback on some videos I've been doing recently. Done a lot of Le Creuset and Stobe videos. Talk about those a little bit. We got carbon steel seasoning. I'm going to mention a couple other videos I did. One with Jed from Cook Culture. Hope you guys saw that. Okay, let's go with Costco and Sam's, a little big box battle right here at the top. A question I often get is, what do I do with all the cookware I review around here? Do I get rid of it? No, I don't. I keep it, I store it, and my wife and I don't argue about much, but where to put all the excess cookware we do argue about. I was at Costco the other day and ran across a sale on these guys. These are wire metal shelves for about 90 bucks. And I jumped on one of those, and it seems like every 4 or 5 months I have to get a new wire shelf just to store my cookware on. So check those out at Costco. Sam's Club had a deal on peanut oil. Now, peanut oil is essentially liquid gold these days, but they had this Luana peanut oil at Sam's, 3 gallons for about 30 bucks, a little bit under 30 bucks. So I thought that was a pretty good deal. Check your local Sam's if you're looking for a deal on peanut oil. Let's talk cooking and kitchen philosophy just a little bit. I've been making some peposo lately, and if you don't know what peposo is, we always say here in English that it's kind of an Italian version of beef stew. Not exactly accurate, but that's a good way to understand it. I guess back in the day, 400 or 500 years ago in Florence, when workers were working on the Duomo and they were baking the tiles for the roof, they had their ovens going and they couldn't afford the fancier cuts of meat, and those workers would get the tougher cuts of meat, like a chuck roast is what I usually use for peposo, something like that, with a lot of marbling and connective tissue. They would put it in with olive oil and garlic, salt, and lots of pepper, and usually Chianti or some sort of red wine, put it in a clay pot and bake that all day long, along with those tiles. At the end of the day, that meat would have softened up and become really tender, and that was a dish called peposo. So I've been making that. It's cold outside. It's a great wintertime dish. But what I have run into is that there is kind of a difference between that kind of original recipe with just a few ingredients, beef, salt, pepper, garlic, olive oil, and the Chianti, and other versions. Chef John over at Food Wishes, love his recipe, and I've made it before. He adds some tomato paste and a couple other things. The guys over at Milk Street, their peposo recipe, they start out with a bunch of onions. And with their beef, they don't actually add the red wine till much later in the cooking process. So it's not slow simmered in the red wine like the original recipe. I've seen other recipes where people start with maybe a sofrito with carrots and celery, and people add sage, they add rosemary, they add thyme. And I guess my question here is, how much can you change that very simple, classic, old school peposo recipe before it becomes just another version of beef stew or an entirely new recipe? And that I don't really know. I've made both versions, kind of the simple old classic version, and I love that. And maybe some of these more modern versions with twists may have a little bit more flavor. They're very good, but are they peposo? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. So what do you guys think? How much can you change a recipe before it becomes an entirely new dish? Butter versus nonstick coatings. Let's see, HD-on2EG writes in and asks, what's worse health-wise, the chemicals from a nonstick pan or tons of oil and butter in a carbon steel pan? So you could go with nonstick, chemical-coated nonstick versus lots of oil and butter. Which one is worse? Here I'm going to throw out a non-scientific opinion, And I think the nonstick coating, at least for me, in my mind, the nonstick coating is worse. And the reason for that is humans and cows, we've domesticated livestock thousands of years ago. We grow up eating dairy products, and I think our bodies are habituated to processing dairy products. Now, that doesn't mean you should eat an entire stick of butter, too many dairy products, but I think at least when it comes to actually processing them, our bodies are fairly well adapted to it. With the nonstick coatings, these are scientific, lab-made, factory-made chemicals that I think our bodies never saw in nature. And I'm not sure our bodies know how to process them. I don't know if they stay in our bodies or if they do damage in a different kind of way than maybe eating too much butter and kind of building up too much fat. Maybe those nonstick chemicals are dangerous in other ways. So if I had to choose, and I guess technically I have chosen, I would much rather have butter in my body than PFOA or PFOE or PFAS or any of those incomprehensible, maybe dangerous molecules created in a factory. Just me. Let's see, Kay Harakim wrote in and says he appreciates my informative videos. Thank you very much. He says that when I do testing, he's a little disappointed that I do not include coil electric stovetops when I test pans. I'm going to see what I can do about that. Maybe I might be able to get a single coil burner. After all, I got the single induction burner. Maybe I can find some sort of coil burner and add that to the mix. Let's see, XYZZY4567 wrote in, and one of the things he mentioned was in some of my reviews, I cooked those Beyond Meat burgers. He says he's an omnivore, but he does eat a fair of those Beyond Meats. And he says, let's see, he says they're very forgiving to cook since it's hard to overcook them or undercook them since they're not, at least as compared to beef. And he says the main problem with them is that they are so expensive. I think being expensive, that is definitely one of the problems. I also think the flavor has gotten better. I think they changed the recipe a little bit. So the flavor is actually a lot better and the smell is a lot better. They used to smell like burning plastic, and now the flavor is at least pretty good. I think that maybe they have gone about things a little bit incorrectly from a business and marketing point of view. If you take something like a Morningstar Farms and their their black bean burgers, I occasionally eat one of those because they're easy to fix, they're convenient, and they taste like vegetables. They're not really trying to say this is a meat substitute quite as much as Beyond Meat, trying to go head to head with the hamburger. If I eat a veggie patty, one of those Morningstar Farms, I'm not expecting it to taste like hamburger. If I eat the Beyond Meat, then mentally, I am trying to compare it and mentally decide, is this better than a hamburger or not? And usually I would rather have the real meat hamburger. So maybe the concept is there, but maybe they're going about marketing it all wrong. Let's see, Jay Stones, 9872, said nice job on one of the videos. He said, FYI, there's a new carbon steel clad pan coming out from a company called Strata. And he mentioned that Jed over at Cook Culture had already done a video on it. Now, I don't know if you guys saw, but I did, Jed and I did a collaborative video, and we did an interview, kind of interviewed each other and talked about what all was going on. And half of it was over in Cook Culture and half of it was here on Uncle Scott's Kitchen. Did you guys enjoy that? Would you like to see more of that type of content? It seems like it was very well received, and Jed did put me in touch with the people making that new Strata pan, and I got in touch with them, and they're going to let me order one. And actually, I've already paid for it. I've ordered one early. They're not available to everybody just yet, so I am waiting for that to come in, and I'll be giving that a seasoning and a little bit of a test. Now, from what I understand, it's a tri-ply carbon steel pan. And I think the bottom layer is stainless steel, and the middle layer is aluminum, and then the cooking surface is carbon steel. So pretty interesting concept, and I think what they're going for is a lighter weight carbon steel pan that should be better at replacing perhaps chemical-coated nonstick pans. So we'll see how that goes when it comes in. Now, one of the things Jed and I kind of went back and forth upon was the amount of seasoning for a new carbon steel skillet. He's more of a proponent of multiple seasonings. I like to season once and just start cooking, especially when a pan is new or new to me. And then down the road, when I'm more comfortable with it, then maybe season it a little bit more. But it looked like in his video, he might have had just a little bit of trouble doing that initial seasoning and cooking. And he seasoned that pan a few more times and got his omelets later on, kind of non-stick. I'm gonna see if I can season once in that Strata and get an egg to slide without doing multiple seasonings. Let's see, I put up a poll on the Uncle Scott's Kitchen YouTube community site, and I asked, if your food sticks, do you blame the cook or the pan? Kind of interesting here, over 600 people have voted. 20% say it must be the pan's fault. About 70% say that they're not worthy and they need to improve and it's the cook's fault. And 11% chose the funny answer of just microwaving your own Chef Boyardee and you don't have to worry about it. So about 7 out of 10, 70%, blame stuck food on the cook. And I'm going to give credit here to Rue Spike for a little bit of honesty. He says, verbally, it's always the pan's fault, but in reality, it's normally user error. I'm going to agree with that here, and congratulations for just a little bit of honesty. Carbon steel seasoning. Jessica Bigelow, 6562, wrote in, and she said, she's talking about one of the carbon steel seasoning videos I did. She said she's glad I posted the video. Got her first Matfer the other day. She was a nervous wreck. She said she seasoned it, and so far it passed the egg test. So congratulations. The videos actually do work if you're having trouble, and you can get those eggs sliding if you just follow the steps. What she's worried about now is she's washed her pan, and she's worried about the bottom of the pan. Does she need to season the bottoms of the carbon steel skillets? And this is a question I get quite often. I don't typically worry too much about the bottoms of the carbon steel skillets. If I'm doing a stovetop seasoning, I don't worry about it. If I'm doing an oven seasoning where I wipe oil all around the pan, I will wipe oil on the bottom of the pan as well, since it's going through the oven anyway. Also, when I'm just cooking, normal day-to-day cooking, if I clean a pan and wash it out and dry it, and then I put the protective layer of oil on the pan, just a few drops of oil, wipe that all around. I wipe that on the bottom as well. And generally speaking, that for me is all I ever need to do for the bottom of the pan. I don't have to do any kind of special seasoning just for the bottom. Let's talk a little bit about community and hanging out here. I mentioned the other day in a different video about some of the different user groups. It's Le Creuset groups or stove groups or lodge cast iron groups, and how it's kind of a community around some of this cookware, and I enjoy those groups. Lawrence Falkenhausen wrote in 2475 and said he agrees, and joining the online communities for these for the cookware has been rewarding, and he would much rather talk about cookware online than scroll news and politics. I thoroughly agree with that. Mr. Spiker 357 also wrote in about the community aspect. I had mentioned that kind of the underlying theme of all of Uncle Scott's Kitchen is that we're all just kind of hanging out and talking about food and cookware and wine and drinks and things we enjoy. And I find that people all over the world kind of do the same thing. If we don't get bogged down too much into any type of news and politics and countries and cultures and all that, we all like good food and drink. He says, as far as hanging out with a friend in the kitchen, totally agrees, and it would be nice for us all to have a scotch and cigar together sometime. I like that. My wife will not let me smoke cigars in the house, so it might be springtime before we can figure that out, but maybe there's some way to do a Zoom or some way we can all have a drink and a scotch and a cigar live together sometime. I don't know. I'll have to think about that just a little bit. See, one more comment on enamel cast iron Dutch ovens. Stykes Roger, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, said he's had a Le Creuset for many years, but after 5 or 6 years, he had some enamel cracking on the bottom and contacted Le Creuset, and they sent him a replacement. So thumbs up there for the warranties, lifetime warranty on the Le Creusets. I've never had any of my enamel cast iron Dutch ovens crack, and I'm even going back to the 20-year-old Tramontina that I have. Now I have chipped some enamel due to either banging it with a spatula or clanging a lid. I have kind of done a couple of chips here and there doing that, but that was kind of my fault. I've never had the enamel down in the cooking surface in the cooking area crack or any problems with that with any of the brands that I've used. I did want to give a shout out to my neighbor. I mentioned that we had fixed some chicken soup for a neighbor who was under the weather, and we took it to her in a Le Creuset Dutch oven, and she said, "Oh, let me give you something." And she sent this back. This is a Lodge commemorative or special edition apple-shaped enamel cast iron Dutch oven. So I've never seen one of these before. I have not cooked in it yet. I thought that guy was kind of neat and interesting. And thank you to her for doing that. Let's see if you are interested in what I am pouring today. This is a little Maker's Mark and Fever Tree Spicy Ginger Ale. That wraps her up for this edition. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Pancast.